Beverly Carter. In today's video, we examine the tragic case of Beverly Carter, a woman whose generous spirit and trusting personality placed her in a situation that ended fatally. This is the terrifying account of a life taken and the pursuit of justice that came after. Beverly Carter's workday was like any normal one. She had just one final house left to show. It was located in a peaceful area outside the town. The buyer claimed he could pay in cash. It appeared to be a straightforward sale. She phoned her husband before entering to tell him she would be home soon, but she never returned. Her handbag remained inside her vehicle, which was discovered in the garage. The entrance to her house stood open, but Beverly was missing. What took place that night shocked her loved ones and the entire community. It was in 1963, in the small town of Anniston, Alabama, that Beverly Carter came into the world. She carried herself with a spirit that showed from an early age that she would become recognized for being strong and enduring. By the age of 16, she was already employed as a waitress. She was motivated, determined, and eager to improve life for herself. During this period, she encountered Carl Carter, a young man 3 years older than she was. They quickly became a couple, and soon after, they were married. Being newly married wasn't simple, however. Early in their union, Beverly faced some difficult challenges. One instance occurred while Carl was driving drunk with Beverly sitting in the back seat. From that point, matters only grew worse. He cursed at her when she urged him to stop the car because he was speeding and driving recklessly. It seemed everything could have ended then, but Beverly made the decision to remain. Shortly after that incident, she learned Carl had been unfaithful to her. It was undeniable she had been deceived, and the emotional strain of it could have shattered her. Yet again, she chose to stay, which was difficult. She believed in giving second chances, and her perseverance appeared to eventually be rewarded. Their relationship started to mend. They moved to Scott, Arkansas, a calm rural town. Life proceeded at a slower pace there, and the Carters began to establish roots. After marrying, they had 3 children, and Beverly deeply cherished her role as a mother. She worked tirelessly to raise her children and make their home a safe and welcoming place to live. Yet as the years passed and the boys grew more self-sufficient, Beverly sensed something shifting. She adored being a mother, but she also felt drawn to create something of her own, a career, a purpose beyond the walls of her house. She first secured a position as a receptionist. It was only the beginning, but her interest truly deepened when she discovered real estate. She studied diligently and obtained her license. After becoming a real estate agent, it was obvious she had discovered her true passion. She devoted herself to her career with both commitment and ability. Her clients admired her. She was recognized for being generous, truthful, and diligent. She quickly rose to be one of the most dependable agents in the community. The career offered her more than simple work satisfaction. It also strengthened her family's financial security. They were not wealthy, but they felt stable. Her entire world revolved around family. With Carl and Beverly's 20th wedding anniversary approaching, they decided to celebrate in a meaningful way. In their early years together, they had little money. To make it even more memorable, they renewed their vows and held the kind of celebration they could once only dream about. It brought them joy and reminded them how far they had progressed. But not every milestone in their journey was positive. In 2003, tragedy struck the Carter household. Chris, their 19-year-old son, lost his life in a car accident. The sorrow was overwhelming. Christopher's life ended far too soon, leaving behind a wife and child. His passing created a void in their existence that could never be filled. Beverly was particularly devastated. To cope with her grief, Beverly poured even more energy into her profession. Her grandchildren also gave her comfort, and their presence helped mend her heart. Her devotion to her children and grandchildren never wavered, and her resilience enabled the family to endure unbearable loss. The morning of September 25, 2014 seemed like any ordinary Thursday, yet Beverly experienced a small personal victory that day. They organized a light-hearted office contest, and she won $50 as a reward. She felt delighted and was eager to finish her day. One last property in Scott was scheduled on her agenda, and she was showing it to a fresh set of buyers. The clients claimed they were prepared to pay in cash, which would make the transaction fast and simple. The appointment was set for 6 p.m. Beverly was optimistic. Around 5:30 p.m. she left the office smiling, feeling upbeat and full of energy. She phoned Carl to inform him about the appointment before heading to the showing. She mentioned the location and said she would pick up dinner on the way home. Everything appeared fine initially, but as the evening dragged on, unease began to grow. By 9 p.m. Beverly had not returned. Carl attempted to call, but no one answered. Again and again he tried, growing more and more anxious each time. One of Beverly's children went to her workplace, hoping she might have returned or left behind some kind of clue. Meanwhile, Carl drove straight to the property in Scott, the last place she was known to be. Upon arrival, what he noticed filled him with dread. Beverly's car was still in the garage, unmoved. As he came closer, he immediately spotted her purse. It was sitting on the passenger seat. That alone was alarming. Being a real estate agent, Beverly had several strict safety practices. She never carried her personal belongings into unknown houses with strangers. She never forgot that precaution. Carl approached the front entrance, his heart racing. The door was unlocked. The home was silent inside. She was not there when he stepped inside and called out her name. After phoning his son right away, he still found no sign of her at the office. The place was locked for the night, and the building stood empty. That was sufficient. It was time to notify the police. Officers arrived at the scene and methodically inspected everything. Yet something seemed unusual to them. Carl had entered the house before contacting law enforcement. He had done so unknowingly, leaving fingerprints and possibly other traces scattered throughout the residence, making it appear as though it might have been a contaminated crime scene. When Carl was summoned for questioning, he laid everything out. He admitted to the truth about his past, the early days of their relationship, and the wrongs he had committed, including infidelity and striking her once. But he insisted, those events were far behind them. He told her how deeply he loved her, how much they had endured together, and how determined he was to bring her back. Investigators understood he was not the suspect they sought, based on his demeanor, his candor, and the level of distress he displayed. Shortly after 1 a.m., Carl received a text message from Beverly's phone. It was brief and unsettling. Everything about the message seemed off. It claimed Beverly had suddenly decided to go out drinking with friends. The tone and phrasing were unusual. Most critically, Beverly never drank alcohol. Carl was not the only one receiving odd messages. Earlier in the search, Carl had spoken with two of Beverly's colleagues, hoping they might know something. Both women also texted Beverly to see if she would respond. They too felt something was wrong with the replies they received, just as Carl had. One colleague sensed trouble and used a secret office code, a silent warning shared between coworkers. She texted Beverly asking if she had left a red folder on her desk. The hidden meaning was, "Are you in danger?" But no response ever came. By morning, Beverly Carter's name was everywhere. Police combed the neighborhood near the home where Beverly was last seen. A neighbor reported that the previous night they had observed a tall, thin, white man with short, dark hair acting suspiciously. He had stepped out of a black vehicle parked on the lawn of the vacant house, rather than in the driveway. When officers examined the grass, they noticed fresh tire tracks. It was a small but significant clue. At that stage, investigators turned their attention to Beverly's work computer. Fortunately, a coworker knew how to log in under her account. Police swiftly located the record of her last appointment in her notes. Steve and Crystal Adams were listed as the prospective buyers she was supposed to meet. Their email address and phone number were also recorded. Yet as detectives probed further, they uncovered something suspicious. The names were fictitious. The email address and phone number did not belong to any real individuals. Instead, they were linked to an anonymous messaging platform. By contacting the service provider, investigators traced the source of the communication. They discovered a name, Aaron Lewis, age 33, residing in Jacksonville, just 15 miles from Scott. Police did not approach his residence with weapons drawn, as they were not yet prepared to make an arrest. First, investigators needed to confirm that this man matched the neighbor's description. If he did, he might provide the key to finding Beverly. Their surveillance soon paid off. The likeness was exact. A tall, slender man with short, dark hair exited the residence and climbed into a black Ford Fusion. Officers in an unmarked vehicle began tailing him. Aaron, however, sensed he was being followed. He accelerated to try and shake the car behind him. The chase was brief. Pushing the vehicle too hard, he lost control, veered off the road, and crashed into a ditch. The impact was severe. Without a seatbelt, he struck his head on the steering wheel, injuring his face. He was removed from the crash site and transported to the hospital for treatment. Initially, there was no cause for police to formally arrest Aaron Lewis. Without a warrant, their role was only to quietly monitor, collect information, and avoid confrontation. Yet once he failed to leave the hospital and remained under care, everything shifted. After undergoing an MRI and treatment for his facial injuries, Aaron acted boldly. Exploiting a lapse in supervision, he slipped out of the hospital before law enforcement could secure him. The man at the center of a rapidly escalating case was suddenly on the run. A large search effort was launched. His photo from the crash scene was broadcast on local television networks. Aaron Lewis's face was now ingrained in the public consciousness across Little Rock and Scott. He was spotted almost immediately. Two office employees discussing the case noticed a man at a bus stop who closely resembled the fugitive. One of them approached casually, pretending to inquire about bus schedules to get a closer look. Convinced it was Aaron Lewis, he signaled discreetly while the other worker phoned police. Aaron, unaware he had been identified, moved along on foot. Hungry, he entered a nearby Subway restaurant, trying not to draw attention. But several patrons recognized him instantly. Unlike the office workers, they were not discreet. Shouts erupted, fingers pointed, and panic spread. Realizing he had been exposed, Aaron bolted from the store and sought cover in a nearby building. By then, it was too late. Within minutes, numerous officers swarmed the location. He was apprehended without further resistance. Once Aaron was back in jail, he started working on his case. He said he had nothing to do with Beverly Carter's disappearance. His first story said that he hadn't been by himself when he went to the house. He said that a friend had come with him and that Aaron had left Beverly and the other man alone inside at some point. He claimed that whatever had happened to her happened after he left. But investigators quickly found flaws in this story. The person he said was his partner was a soldier who was stationed many miles away on the day Beverly went missing. His excuse was perfect. Several witnesses and phone records showed that he had not left his job. Aaron knew the story was not true. He still wouldn't say what really happened. The detectives tried something new. They pushed him for information, hoping that he would finally tell them where Beverly was. Aaron didn't say much, almost cryptically. She might still be living, he said, but only if she was found quickly. He said she hadn't had any food or water since he was arrested, which made it sound like time was running out. Aaron agreed to take police to two buildings where he said Beverly was kept because he still had hope. They both searched very deeply. She wasn't there. Aaron changed the story again. Now he said that someone else, a partner, must have moved her. Since Aaron wasn't telling the truth, detectives looked at his phone records. They tracked his moves on the day Beverly went missing, which led them to an empty concrete plant 25 miles from Scott, where he used to work. It was a lonely, sad place. The police started their search with sad hearts because they didn't know what they would find. On September 30th, what they were afraid of came true. They found her in a small grave with loose dirt around her. The grave hadn't even been properly hidden. There was still some dirt around one of Beverly's arms. Her body had been buried quickly. When the layers of duct tape that were covering her head were taken off by forensic experts, the truth became unbearable. Beverly Carter had died from not being able to breathe. She was squished so badly that she couldn't breathe. When the cops told Aaron Lewis the truth, that Beverly's body had been found, he changed his story again. He now said that he and Beverly had been cheating on each other after meeting on Craigslist. He said that they had planned a secret meeting for the day she died. But during closeness, something went wrong that led to a terrible accident. But that story didn't make sense at all. Her family and friends knew her very well. She worked full-time and was a loyal wife. There was no proof that she had an affair. Even worse, the way her body was lying, the duct tape mask, and the homemade grave gave a very different picture. In his next story of what happened, Aaron put the blame on someone else. He said it wasn't him this time. His wife, Crystal, was the one he blamed. At least Crystal was said to have met Beverly, but something went wrong again. The detectives didn't believe it, but they did look at Crystal Lowry more closely. The records of her calls told their own story. Aaron had been in touch with Beverly a lot more often than usual on the day she disappeared. That wasn't proof of engagement by itself, but it did seem fishy. About 1 month after Beverly went missing, Crystal was caught. As soon as she was arrested, she broke down. The 42-year-old man admitted guilt and told police everything. Even though they were still formally married, things between her and Aaron had gotten worse. They only lived together because they couldn't afford to move out. The worry over money had made things too tense to bear. It was their wish to leave, but they needed money to do it. Aaron then came up with a horrible idea. Kidnap a rich person and demand a fee. Crystal thought about it for a while, but didn't say no. Aaron recommended that they go after a woman real estate agent. They dressed well and drove nice cars. Most importantly, they often worked alone. That's how they found Beverly Carter, who was one of the best real estate managers in the area. They thought she would be a great target. Aaron used a fake name to call her and said he was a buyer moving from out of state with his wife. He told Beverly that they wanted to find a quiet house close to Little Rock. For his plan to work, he even picked a listing in a remote place. Beverly didn't want to show the house at first. Her agency's rules said that private showings to single guys were not allowed, especially in outlying areas. Aaron quickly brought Crystal into the talk when he thought his plan might not work out. She called to make sure she would also be at the showing. Beverly agreed to the meeting after feeling better. Clients said they were ready to pay with cash, which always caught agents' attention. But only Aaron showed up when it was time. He said sorry and said his wife was late. Beverly, who was always efficient, let the showing go ahead. That was the last house she ever went into. They went through the house together, starting on the first floor. Things changed, though, when they went up the stairs to the first floor. Aaron did something. He hit Beverly out of the blue. She wasn't strong enough to fight back because she had just had plastic surgery, including a tummy tuck. She tried to fight him off but failed as he taped her hands together. She was pushed into the trunk by him. He planned to hold Beverly hostage and demand $100,000 in exchange for her life. He was thinking of an old empty building at a concrete plant 25 miles outside of Scott that used to be his job. It looked like the ideal place to hide someone. But Aaron hadn't done the most basic things to get ready. He saw that the building wasn't empty or right for what he was planning when he got there. There was no backup plan or other place to go. He had no place to take the scared woman who was locked in his trunk. He was scared and turned to his wife, who was the only one who knew the plan. He snapped a picture of Beverly, terrified and bound in the trunk, and sent it to Crystal with the single word help. Crystal was furious. At work at the time, she had never agreed to having Beverly brought to their home. But it was already too late. Beverly was there, locked in the bathroom. They scrambled to decide what to do next. Aaron had already drafted a message on his phone for Crystal to send to Beverly's husband. The scheme was simple. Make it seem as though Beverly was being coerced into begging Carl not to call the police and to follow the kidnapper's demands. The message, however, was never sent. It remained on Aaron's phone, another piece of incriminating evidence yet to be uncovered. Initially, their plan was to force Carl to transfer ransom money into Beverly's bank account and then drain the funds using her debit cards. Aaron even claimed he knew her PIN numbers. But Beverly's cards were still in her purse, left behind in her car during the abduction. Realizing the mistake, he returned to retrieve them before anyone discovered the oversight. By then, it was too late. Police had already arrived at the scene, combing the area. An officer even stopped Aaron as he drove past, mistaking him for a neighbor, and asked if he had noticed anything unusual. Aaron stayed calm, offering nothing, and then drove home. But once there, the situation only grew worse. Crystal, ever calculating, recognized a new danger. Beverly had already seen Aaron's face, and now, locked inside their bathroom, she could see prescription pill bottles with Crystal's name clearly printed on them. If Beverly lived, she could easily identify them both. Releasing her was no longer an option. Crystal, however, refused to commit the act herself. Instead, she told Aaron plainly that Beverly had to be eliminated. So on that final grim night, Aaron Lewis collected Beverly from the house and drove her back to the cement plant. Because of the cold, he wound duct tape around her head repeatedly until she could no longer breathe. Once her body went still, he buried her in a shallow grave. Since Crystal confessed to her role, there was no need for a drawn-out trial. With her guilty plea, she received a 30-year prison sentence for her part in the crime. Aaron, however, clung to his lies. At his 2016 trial, Crystal testified against him. Aaron continued to deny all charges. He insisted his only involvement was concealing Beverly's death. He claimed Crystal was solely responsible. Then his account shifted once more. He even alleged that Beverly's recorded voice had been generated on a computer, though he refused to say what program had been used. Aaron asserted that the duct tape mask had merely been intended to keep insects off Beverly's face while she was buried. The judge rejected every part of his explanation. After just 4 days of testimony, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. Aaron Lewis was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. But the story did not end there. In 2020, Crystal Lowry petitioned the court for an early release. She claimed she no longer posed a threat because she had embraced faith while incarcerated. She declared her wish to repay her debt through freedom and charitable work. The court disagreed. Her motion was denied. Beverly Carter had been a mother, wife, professional, and friend who wanted nothing more than to return home that evening. Crystal remains in prison, serving the entirety of the 30-year sentence she was handed for her role in Beverly Carter's cold, premeditated murder. In the end, 2 individuals robbed her of life because they saw not a person but a profit. The family that was once whole is now forever shattered. Moving on to the next case. Blanca Arellano. In this video, we explore the tragic story of a young Mexican woman who traveled to Peru to meet the man she had fallen in love with online. What was meant to be a hopeful, romantic journey turned into a nightmare. Their relationship had lasted 2 years but existed only through phone screens, and just a few months after her arrival, her body was discovered on a remote beach. So what really happened? On November 10, 2022, the first signs appeared. Fishermen off the coast of Huacho, Peru, were startled by the loud cries of nearby seagulls. Curious, they approached and found several decaying bodies scattered along the sand. When police arrived, they cordoned off the area and began collecting evidence. Forensic analysis determined the victim was a woman around 50 years old. Detectives immediately faced complications. Her facial features and fingerprints had been deliberately removed. The mutilation appeared highly professional, and several internal organs were missing. Initially, authorities suspected involvement by an organized crime group possibly connected to black market trading. However, as the investigation progressed, a crucial lead emerged. An immigration record matched a missing person report filed by Mexican authorities, enabling Peruvian police to identify the victim as a Mexican woman who had traveled to Peru to begin a new life with someone she trusted. It was soon confirmed that the victim was Blanca Arellano, born in Mexico on February 6, 1971. Blanca had previously worked as a tour guide, but the COVID-19 pandemic devastated Mexico's tourism industry. With visitor numbers plummeting, she lost her job and became a rideshare driver to make ends meet. This work offered little stability, especially after March 23, 2020, when Mexico declared a nationwide public health emergency. With people staying home, ride requests dropped sharply, leaving Blanca with minimal income. Her days became largely confined to her home, where she spent hours playing online games. During this time, Blanca met Juan Pablo Villafuerte. He was 12 years younger than her. Juan was a student at Cayetano Heredia University, studying medicine with an emphasis on biology and pharmacology. He was passionate about video games and also managed one of the largest online gaming communities in the region. They quickly grew close through conversations within the gaming group. Soon, Juan asked Blanca to help him run the group as a co-moderator. She happily accepted, as she had some free time. Because they collaborated so often, they began speaking privately as well. Over time, their friendship deepened into something more. Despite living thousands of miles apart, they formed a strong mental and emotional connection through their screens. Their online relationship evolved into a long-distance romance. Thanks to the internet, Blanca even threw Juan a virtual birthday party, and he responded by recording numerous songs just for her. After nearly 2 years of daily communication and check-ins, they began discussing the possibility of living together. Blanca and Juan grew increasingly excited about meeting in person as their relationship developed. However, Blanca could not afford a plane ticket to Peru. Understanding her situation, Juan offered to travel to Mexico instead. Blanca was visibly thrilled by his promise. She eagerly anticipated showing him her city and introducing him to her family and friends for the first time. Yet, things did not go as planned. Not long after, Juan informed her that he could not come to Mexico after all. Blanca was deeply disappointed, having looked forward to the meeting for so long. Impatient and determined, she decided to travel to Peru on her own to meet him. To fund the trip, Blanca began selling her belongings. Her gas stove, warm blankets, rice cooker, winter clothes, some old home decorations, and even her car. She managed to raise just over $5,400 in total. While preparing for the journey, Juan continued to assure her through their screens that he loved her, would care for her, and that they would spend the rest of their lives together. Blanca had complete trust in him and began planning to move to Peru permanently to start a new life with Juan. Her family grew concerned when they learned of her intentions. Blanca was nearly 50 years old and had spent most of her life single. Yet she was now prepared to leave everything behind for a man she had never met in person. Despite their worries, Blanca remained steadfast in her decision. Her family tried to persuade her to stay in Mexico, where she had relatives, friends, and a sense of safety, but she insisted that this might be her last chance at happiness. Eventually, her parents relented. They told Blanca to stay in touch and immediately alert them if anything seemed off once she arrived in Peru. Blanca nodded, reassuring them that everything would be fine. On July 28, 2022, after a few weeks of preparation, she gathered her belongings and went to the airport. Her entire family came to say farewell, giving her tight hugs and reminding her to stay safe. She promised not to worry them. Her plan was to meet Juan in Peru, explore a few major towns, and then move into his apartment by the sea. Blanca arrived at Jorge Chávez International Airport early the next morning at 2:45 a.m., exactly as planned. Juan, the man she had fallen for online, was already there to pick her up. His modest apartment was in the coastal town of Huelva, and he took her there. From the moment they met, they seemed comfortable with one another. Despite never having met in person before, their conversation felt natural. Blanca happily took pictures with Juan and sent them to her family to show she had arrived safely. Knowing someone was there to meet her eased her family's fears. The first few days in Peru went fairly smoothly. Blanca walked along the beach, enjoying the fresh air, then returned to Juan's small apartment by the water, which helped her adjust to her new surroundings. Soon after, she purchased a SIM card from her home country and put it in a second phone. Since her family remained in Mexico, she used one phone to communicate with them, while the Peruvian number handled daily matters. At this time, Juan continued attending school during the week, so Blanca needed a local phone to order food and manage errands independently. However, on November 7, 2022, something felt wrong. Blanca had been texting or calling her family every day, but suddenly she stopped for several hours. No messages or check-ins came as usual. Her family grew even more alarmed when her social media accounts went silent on the same day. Blanca had always been active online, sharing pieces of her life regularly, so this sudden silence was unusual. In fact, just the morning before, she had messaged her niece, assuring her that everything with Juan was going well. At first, the family thought she might simply be busy and hadn't had a chance to respond. But as darkness fell and still no word came, their concern grew. They called and texted repeatedly throughout the evening and into the night, yet she never replied. Realizing the unusual length of her silence, they knew action was necessary. Blanca's niece became the most determined person amid the chaos. Because she was very close to her aunt, she was terrified when Blanca went missing. She immediately began checking Blanca's social media links. Blanca's profile made it easy to find Juan's contact information. She messaged him right away, hoping he might know something. A few minutes later, he replied, claiming that he had also lost contact with Blanca a few days prior. He said that she had ended things on her own, purchased a ticket back to Mexico, and was probably already on her way home. He added that her phone might have died, which was why no one could reach her. To clarify, Juan sent a screenshot of their most recent chat, which occurred on November 7, 2022. He had advised her to be careful on that road, known for thefts, and wished her a safe trip to Lima. Blanca had responded with a brief, polite goodbye. Juan also told Blanca's niece that Blanca would contact the family once she returned to Mexico. Yet those texts only made her niece more uneasy. Based on what she knew about Blanca, she was certain her aunt would never remain so silent if she were genuinely heading home. Blanca always informed her family of her travel plans, whether domestic or international. That was why her niece continued texting Juan, asking further questions about Blanca's whereabouts. Initially, his replies were calm, but as the conversation continued, he grew increasingly irritable. Eventually, he snapped, accusing her of meddling in his life, and then refused to discuss anything further. Feeling helpless, Blanca's family decided to take public action. They began seeking help on social media, hoping that someone who had seen her might come forward. Even more concerning, Blanca's niece shared screenshots of her last conversations with Juan, urging everyone to pay close attention to him. Within hours, Juan's photo spread across numerous social media platforms, attracting massive attention and quickly igniting a media storm in both Mexico and Peru. Blanca's family contacted the Peruvian consulate and issued public appeals, asking the community to help spread the word in hopes of finding their missing loved one. As calls demanding Juan be questioned increased, Peruvian authorities intervened. Juan eventually appeared for questioning, but he avoided most of the inquiries. Throughout the interview, he maintained a cold, emotionless demeanor, staring straight ahead without showing any visible signs of concern. During questioning, Juan refused to alter his story. He insisted that Blanca had gone missing on her own and that he had nothing to do with it. He even claimed he didn't know her and had never been in a relationship with her. Police asked him 73 questions, none of which he answered directly. He only gave a vague response when asked where he had been when Blanca disappeared, claiming he had been somewhere else entirely. Security camera footage, however, told a different story. On November 7th, the day Blanca went missing, Juan was recorded on surveillance buying bleach at a store near his home. Coincidentally, this was also the day Blanca made her last phone call to her family. The timing of these events immediately raised suspicion around Juan. Blanca had vanished inexplicably, and he was captured on camera purchasing bleach right before her disappearance. He quickly became the main suspect. Blanca's family publicly confronted him on social media, demanding answers. In response, Juan posted on his own accounts, claiming he was not romantically involved with Blanca and that his only actions had been helping her financially and arranging temporary housing. He added that Blanca might not have fully understood their relationship due to emotional or mental struggles. He was also mad that her sister had put his picture online and made him look like a criminal, even though he hadn't done anything wrong and had no reason to hide. Juan kept going. He then said that he had nothing to do with Blanca's choice to visit Peru. He claimed that she had gone on the trip by herself without being invited or making any plans ahead of time. When she got to Lima capital with little money and no one to help her, he said he gave her money to go back to Mexico and let her stay at his apartment for a while. It's worth noting that Juan quickly changed his social media profile picture and removed all posts that might have suggested a link between him and Blanca. Once the case became public, the review also found that Blanca's time in Peru was not at all the peaceful time her family had hoped for. Blanca called a Mexican airline a few days before she disappeared on October 3, 2022, to ask for a refund for her empty return ticket. The company told her, though, that they couldn't handle the request. From a different point of view, Blanca's daily life in Peru showed signs of being hard and lonely. One gave her only $22 a week to cover all of her costs of living. Also, Blanca had to stay in the small rental room with Juan whenever one had to go to Lima capital for work and wasn't allowed to leave. The agreements with the landlord said that the room could only house one person. However, on October 9, 2022, things changed in a big way. Along the beach in Huelva, Peru, a group of fishermen found several body parts lying around. They called the cops right away. The victim's face and fingerprints were destroyed on purpose, but the exact surgical cuts on their body showed a level of skill that would not have been possible without medical training. The cops found an intact, clear-style ring still on the victim's finger, which was the most important thing. The investigators had to change the direction of their search after making this find. It was confirmed by Blanca's family that the ring was the same one she always wore. The same ring could be seen in several daily pictures she sent to her family. Something she thought of as a good luck charm and hadn't taken off in years was a keepsake with a personal symbol etched on it. There was more, though. She got the design on the ring tattooed on her wrist because she loved it so much. It wasn't just jewelry to her. It was a spiritual symbol that she thought kept her strong and safe during the hardest times of her life. Blanca's family also remembered that she had a mole on her back that stood out. In a scary accident, the forensic team found the remains of a mole in the same place, and they looked a lot alike. This made people even more suspicious that the body parts might belong to Blanca, but a full forensic study was needed to be sure. Not long after that, on October 15, 2022, cops searched Juan's apartment without warning. After going there, they found blood in a number of places, mostly around the bed, the bathroom, and other places. Testing with DNA proved that all of the blood belonged to Blanca. In addition to the blood proof, police found some of her personal items, such as clothes, toiletries, and a woman's suitcase. The suitcase said Mexico on it. On the wall was a Mexican flag, and there were long pieces of hair all over the floor. Blanca's family looked over the things and pictures and confirmed that they all belonged to her. Also, digital forensics showed that one looked up how to reset a ZTE phone on Google on the same day Blanca lost touch with her family. It just so happened that Blanca used a ZTE phone. At about the same time, a neighbor said they saw one leaving his flat several times while carrying what looked like 8 plastic bags. A friend of Juan's also confirmed that around 7 p.m. On November 7th, Juan called him and asked for a favor to ride a motorcycle to a nearby store and buy some cookies, smokes, and black trash bags. After 30 minutes, the motorcycle was seen parked outside of the building where Juan lived. 2 days later, another neighbor saw Juan walking nervously down the street with a trash bag in his hand before quickly turning into an empty alley. It looked like he was afraid that someone was watching him, because his face was tense. People started to think that Blanca had been hurt because of these strange actions. Soon after, Juan was seen going out again to get cleaning supplies. From that day on, he stopped going to school all of a sudden. As more evidence came in, the police finally turned their attention to Juan. The moment the news got out, he was immediately criticized by a lot of people. The medical school where he was a student quickly kicked him out and took his name off their list of students. Taking advantage of the attention, some people on the internet started looking into Juan's past and found that he had been convicted of domestic against his ex-wife in 2016. Others found out that Juan had a brother who was exactly the same as him. As a way to help people tell them apart, Juan got a unique tattoo on his body. Even though there was more and more proof against Juan, he insisted that he had nothing to do with Blanca's death. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Juan had been posting online videos of human organ dissections around the time Blanca went missing. Alarmingly, the types of organs shown in those videos seemed to match some of the body parts taken from Blanca. Authorities began to suspect that these stolen body parts belonged to her, though it remained unclear whether Juan acted alone or had accomplices. Given the potential connection to illegal organ trafficking, investigators considered that the case might reveal a larger criminal network. Further investigation revealed that Juan frequently traveled between Peru and Bolivia before and after the crime. Large, unusual deposits were also found in his personal bank account, raising suspicions of organized crime involvement. One officer noted that Juan had been seeing another woman behind Blanca's back, which cast further doubt on his claims of genuine love for her. The evidence suggested that Juan had carefully isolated Blanca once she arrived in Peru, away from friends, family, and any support system. Investigators believe he then killed her and sold her organs on the black market, likely thinking that dumping her body in the water would make it disappear permanently. However, Blanca's family refused to give up and relentlessly pursued the truth. On October 17, 2022, Peruvian authorities arrested Juan. They verified his identity, using a unique tattoo on his arm to ensure he hadn't switched identities with an identical twin. At the time of his arrest, he was with a 26-year-old woman who claimed they had been dating online for a month and knew nothing about Blanca. Juan told her that Blanca was simply a friend from Mexico. Later that same afternoon, Peru's Criminal Investigation Unit confirmed that Juan and Blanca had indeed lived together in the same apartment, solidifying the case against him. Police discovered a large amount of blood at the scene, indicating that Blanca had likely been beaten before she disappeared. Forensic analysis confirmed that the body parts recovered from the beach belonged to her. As more evidence surfaced, Juan was formally charged with aggravated murder and organ trafficking. Throughout questioning, he behaved erratically and repeatedly lied. Authorities also found a backpack containing a substantial amount of cash in his apartment. When confronted, Juan denied ownership, claiming it wasn't his, but his girlfriend immediately identified it as belonging to him. He continued to dodge or ignore most questions, offering no useful answers even after hours of interrogation. On October 22, 2022, Juan was placed in solitary confinement while awaiting trial, expected to remain there for 9 months. During this time, he frequently complained about the conditions, including sharing a bathroom, sleeping on the floor, and limited access to showers. When the trial finally began, Juan stuck to his previous statements without altering his story. He claimed the bloody mattress found in his room was already in use, that he had no knowledge of the stains, and even suggested that Blanca might have brought someone else who could have harmed her. However, The court rejected these claims and determined that Juan was responsible for her death. In February 2023, Blanca's body was returned to Mexico. On September 12, 2023, Juan was sentenced to 35 years in prison and ordered to pay $15,000 to the victim's family. Despite the conviction, Juan continues to maintain his innocence. He claims the case has cost him his family, career, and reputation, stating he no longer wants to live because he cannot prove his innocence. He insists the accusations rely solely on his status as a doctor and expresses hope that law enforcement will eventually uncover the real perpetrator. Blanca Arellano's case is not only the tragic story of a woman who fell in love and lost her life, but also a stark warning about the dangers of relationships formed online. In the digital world, where people can present a perfect image of themselves, the truth is often hidden until it's too late. Moving on to the next case. Claremont Ripper. The story of the Claremont Ripper. USA, during the 1990s. As soon as the young woman stepped out of her morning shower, she had no idea that a predator was watching her from inside her own room. As she reached for a towel, soft steam continued to rise from her damp skin. She believed she was alone. She wasn't. In an instant, neighbors heard the dull thud of a body hitting the floor. Then came the sharp cry of a scream. And then nothing. She became one of 6 victims who lost their lives. Tiffany Schultz was 20 years old and had everything she wanted in life. Tiffany was born into a well-known family in Northern California. She moved to San Diego with big plans to study writing at San Diego State University. Her friends described her as intelligent and kind. But Tiffany was struggling behind her cheerful exterior. She was forced to do exotic dancing at a neighborhood club to earn money, even though she didn't want to. She spoke about it often. She said it was a necessary evil and just a step toward her ultimate goal of becoming an English professor. Her relationship with Christopher Burns, her 28-year-old boyfriend, was troubled, which made things even harder for her. They frequently argued about her job, and he would sometimes lose his temper. People in the neighborhood had grown accustomed to hearing loud voices from Tiffany's apartment, accompanied by slamming doors and faint cries from time to time. But Tiffany was determined to regain her independence no matter what. She planned a future free of stress and worry. For Tiffany, however, someone else had far darker plans than she could have imagined. San Diego awoke to a clear, bright winter morning on January 12, 1990. Around 10 a.m., Tiffany was in her second-floor Cowley Way apartment alone. Someone had been observing her from a distance while she was on her balcony, taking careful notes on her routine and being drawn in by how open she appeared to be. The same person approached her apartment undetected and unheard. He slowly climbed the stairs to her open door. Soon after, Tiffany returned from the deck, preparing for a shower. Her clothes were casually discarded, unaware that her every movement was being watched from inside her home. While Tiffany stood under the shower, the intruder silently entered the kitchen and slowly drew out a large, sharp knife. Armed and without hesitation, he walked directly into the bathroom, driven by impulses that defied understanding. Tiffany stood no chance when she stepped out of the shower into the steam-filled room. In a violent frenzy, the attacker stabbed her 47 times. Each strike was delivered with precise intent, showing a disturbing fixation on her heart. The blade tore into her chest again and again, striking vital organs and leaving no doubt about his intent. He wanted Tiffany dead. The scene resembled uncontrolled slaughter, with blood smeared across the walls, splattered on the tile floor, and soaking into the carpet. Later, neighbors reported hearing a scream abruptly cut off, followed by a heavy thud. They dismissed it as another fight between Tiffany and her boyfriend and didn't call the police. Hours later, Tiffany's boyfriend, Christopher, discovered her lifeless body in the apartment. By the time police arrived, it was already too late. Detectives immediately suspected Christopher, given his history of volatility with Tiffany, which appeared to align with the brutal nature of the crime. Within hours, he was in custody, interrogated relentlessly as detectives pressed for a confession. But 3 days later, the evidence cleared him. Christopher hadn't been near the apartment at the time of the killing, and fingerprints on the murder weapon didn't match his. His release terrified San Diego police. It meant the real killer was still free and likely to strike again. Their fears were realized. On February 16, 1990, just 1 month later, another young woman was murdered in Claremont, not far from Tiffany's home. At 21, Janine Weinhold had her future mapped out. She aspired to become a lawyer. Fiercely independent, she enjoyed living alone and decorating her apartment. Friends remembered her as driven, intelligent, and always positive. On that grim Friday morning, Janine passed the time baking cookies and folding laundry, unaware that someone was silently watching her every move. Just after midday, the intruder slipped through her open apartment door and struck without warning. When her roommate arrived later that day, the once cheerful apartment had turned into a scene of horror. Janine lay on her bedroom floor, stabbed more than 30 times in the chest. The wounds clustered around her heart, echoing the chilling precision seen in Tiffany's murder. Evidence of her struggle was everywhere. Defensive cuts marked her hands and arms, while blood soaked her clothing, books, and walls. The violence had not ended with the stabbing. Signs of a brutal assault made the crime even more harrowing. This time, investigators recovered crucial DNA evidence that would later prove vital. But at the moment, no immediate answers emerged. 2 savage killings in just a few weeks left Claremont residents terrified. Police urged the community to lock their doors at all hours, and women avoided walking alone after dark. Fear permeated the city. Despite heightened vigilance, the killer struck again. On April 3, 1990, 18-year-old Holly Tarr, visiting San Diego from Michigan for spring break, became the next victim. She had spent the afternoon by the pool before returning to her brother Richard's apartment. After a shower, Holly forgot to lock the door. That small oversight proved fatal. Moving silently with another stolen kitchen knife, the attacker crept inside. Unlike the drawn-out assaults before, this killing was swift. Holly was stabbed once, directly through the heart. The blow was so precise and devastating that she never had a chance to survive. As the killer fled, he collided with a maintenance worker who had rushed to investigate the commotion. They grappled briefly, but the attacker broke free, abandoning a bloodied knife in a nearby alley. Now, with 3 young women brutally slain in a matter of months, investigators saw the pattern emerge. San Diego had a serial killer in its midst, and the entire city reeled in shock. In only a few months, 3 young women had been stabbed to death in their own homes, each time with kitchen knives. The city lived in fear of the unidentified killer. While police increased patrols and went door to door seeking information, the attacker remained hidden and grew more brazen. In May 1990, he struck again. This time, it happened in East San Diego, beyond the city center, catching police by surprise. The victim, 38-year-old mother Alyssa Keller, lived alone while her daughter Michelle was away on a school trip. One night, Alyssa was savagely attacked inside her apartment, stabbed repeatedly in an act of horrific cruelty. The wounds were so severe that her eyes had been damaged beyond recognition. The intruder stole jewelry from the home and left behind a distinct sneaker print, an important clue, though not enough to identify him. The following evening, Michelle returned and discovered her mother's bloodied body concealed beneath a blanket, a traumatic memory that would haunt her forever. Investigators quickly linked Alyssa's murder to the earlier Claremont killings, hoping to stop the killer before he struck again. Unfortunately, they failed. On September 13, 1990, another crime shook San Diego. 42-year-old Pamela Clark and her 18-year-old daughter Amber were brutally murdered in their home. That day, Pamela left for the gym around 8 a.m., while Amber remained asleep inside. At approximately 10 a.m., neighbors reported hearing Amber's terrified voice followed by that of an unfamiliar man. Moments later came a chilling scream, then silence. Tragically, the neighbors assumed it was a family dispute and never contacted the police, an example of the bystander effect often seen in real crimes. Around 11 a.m., Pamela returned home unaware of the danger awaiting her. The moment she walked inside, she found Amber lying dead on the floor. Before Pamela could react, she too was attacked. She sustained 11 stab wounds to her upper chest, clustered near her heart. Amber had suffered the same fate, also stabbed 11 times in the chest, her injuries concentrated around the heart. The knife used in the attack was driven with such force that it broke, leaving the blade on the bathroom floor. After Amber had been killed, her body was deliberately moved and placed in the doorway between her bedroom and the hallway. She was unclothed, with her legs stretched outward. Pamela's body was also dragged inside and positioned at the front door. She too was naked and posed in the same way as her daughter. When the police later discovered the bodies, they remarked that the scene looked like something out of a horror film. With 6 murders taking place in just 9 months, each one disturbingly alike, the public grew desperate for answers. The killer was cautious, methodical, and intelligent, leaving behind no fingerprints or other obvious traces. At their most desperate point, San Diego police turned to criminal profiling experts, hoping psychology might provide what science could not. The experts indicated that the killer was most likely young, physically fit, and familiar with the neighborhoods where he operated. They also warned police that his appetite for violence was intensifying. In response, neighborhood watch groups quickly formed. Detectives interviewed hundreds of potential witnesses, including each victim's neighbors, friends, co-workers, and acquaintances. Thousands of hours of surveillance footage from stores, apartments, and businesses in the area were examined. Tip lines rang constantly, with every caller investigated and each lead pursued. Yet as time went on, hope began to fade until a breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source. On February 3, 1991, nearly a year after Tiffany's murder, a local resident reported something that changed everything. Late at night in the Scripps Ranch neighborhood, she noticed a suspicious young man lingering in a blue Nissan outside her neighbor's home, showing unusual interest in the property. The man attempted to enter the house. Disturbed by his behavior, she quietly wrote down the license plate number as he drove away. Her call to the police triggered a chain of events that would finally blow the case wide open. Within hours, San Diego police traced the vehicle registration to a local resident named Cleophas Prince Jr., who had never previously come to police attention. He was born on July 24, 1967, in Birmingham, Alabama. He had a rough youth full of poverty and violence. His father got a 40-year prison sentence for second-degree murder when he was only 3 years old. He did 14 years of that sentence. Cleophas grew up in one of the worst areas of Birmingham, where crime was very widespread. He was quiet and shy in school, and his teachers thought he wasn't doing well enough. He started committing small crimes like stealing and vandalism when he was a teenager. He quit high school without telling anyone in the end. When he was 19, he joined the Navy, but he was kicked out soon after for theft. Late in 1989, he moved to Claremont with Charla Lewis, the woman he was seeing. His neighbors said he was quiet, nice, and in good shape. But now the cops knew who he was. They connected him to an attempted crime. That was the same as all the dead bodies. Detectives put up cameras right away, without telling him, and in silence. The cops arrested Cleophas in secret in the parking lot of a gym on February 4, 1991. At first, he was held because he had an outstanding traffic warrant. This allowed detectives to question him without giving away their assumption of murder too soon. Cleophas stayed calm and denied having anything to do with it. The cops reluctantly let him go because they didn't want to give away too much information without enough proof. But they kept a close eye on them anyway. But Cleophas wasn't dumb. As his worries grew, he quickly left California and went back to his home in Alabama. But the police were getting closer to Cleophas and began to put together a solid case. They carefully connected each crime to his appearance, his car, and the way he drove. Soon, witnesses came forward and identified him as the strange person who had been seen near several murder scenes. The cops put out a warrant for his arrest once they had enough proof. Cleophas Prince was caught in Birmingham in early March 1991, but at first he was only held for a small theft. The Birmingham cops didn't know they had the right person until they found out he was wanted for 6 murders. Cleophas had to give DNA samples from his blood, breath, and hair, because the court told him to. The tests that followed gave the agents the big clue they had been waiting for. The DNA from Cleophas's sperm found at Janine Weinhold's crime scene matched perfectly. The chances of making a mistake were almost impossible. After months of great fear, grief, and doubt, the police in San Diego were finally sure that they had caught the serial killer who was terrorizing the city. When police showed Cleophas the forensic results, he kept denying everything. He seemed cold and uninterested. The cops no longer cared about his denial. There was a huge amount of proof. Things get even stranger from here on out. The jewelry that was stolen from the victims was found in the jewelry drawer of Cleophas' lover. The gold was a Christmas present from him. Charla, his girlfriend, was wearing gold that belonged to people who had been killed. After that, the cops found even more proof. Once someone has worn shoes for a while, they leave a unique footprint because everyone moves differently. Footprints that matched his unique sneaker design proved beyond a doubt that he was guilty. On March 4, 1991, Cleophas was indicted with 6 murder charges in San Diego. San Diego could at last begin to recover now that they believed their streets were safer, even though they were still troubled by memories of the man who had once stalked them. The trial started in June 1993 and quickly turned into one of the most discussed and emotional court cases in San Diego. There were 27 accusations against Cleophas, including 6 charges of first-degree murder, assault, theft, and other offenses. In the courtroom were reporters, mourning families, and increased security. The lead prosecutor reviewed every crime in great detail and demonstrated how each had happened. The jurors were presented with disturbing forensic proof, including detailed pictures of the crime scenes. Considerable damaging evidence was also shown to them that tied Cleophas directly to stealing jewelry from others and giving it to his girlfriend without her knowledge. It would be minimizing things to say the evidence was powerful. Victim impact statements from relatives also devastated the hearts of the jurors. The parents spoke intensely about their lost daughters and described how cruelly their promising futures had been taken away. Several jurors openly broke down as parents spoke about how the deaths of their daughters had left them shattered and hollow. The defense, however, faced significant challenges. They argued that Cleophas was wrongly charged due to weak evidence, mistaken identity, and the investigators' desperation. The defense insisted that the police had mishandled the evidence and concentrated too quickly on Cleophas without properly pursuing other possible leads. But naturally, the prosecution's compelling forensic proof, eyewitness testimonies, DNA evidence, and stolen property that implicated him left the defense's case far weaker. Throughout the trial, Cleophas was reported to have remained calm and not displayed much emotion or direct involvement. He often wrote on a notepad or spoke quietly with his attorneys. The jurors were already distressed by the graphic evidence and thorough descriptions of his shocking crimes, and his detached manner did nothing to help. The jury began deliberations in early July 1993 after months of testimony. On July 13th, they returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all 27 counts. Cleophas Prince Jr. was convicted of 6 murders with special circumstances, making him eligible for the death penalty. As the verdict was read, Cleophas remained expressionless, staring straight ahead. His mother, Dorothy Prince, cried out in anguish and collapsed in shock. Prosecutors argued that Cleophas's crimes were exceptionally cruel, violent, and predatory, warranting the ultimate punishment. In a chilling final statement to the court, Cleophas addressed the victims' families. He denied responsibility, claimed sympathy for their pain, but offered no apology. He insisted he was innocent, which only deepened the family's anger. On November 5, 1993, the judge formally sentenced him to death, emphasizing the calculated brutality of the killings. As he was led from the courtroom, Cleophas gave only a brief shake of his head, prompting one grieving relative to shout, "Go to hell and rot." Though the verdict brought some relief, the scars left on San Diego remained deep. In memory of the victims, community projects appeared across the city, memorial plaques, playgrounds, and scholarships to honor lives cut short. The legal process stretched on for years as Cleophas's defense team filed multiple appeals, challenging everything from DNA evidence to the fairness of the trial. But in 2007, the California Supreme Court upheld both his conviction and death sentence unanimously. Today, Cleophas Prince Jr. remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Now in his late 50s, he continues to maintain his innocence, never once admitting guilt. Despite his death sentence, recent changes in California law make it unlikely he will ever be executed. Decades later, San Diego still remembers the horror of the Claremont killer, and the shadow of his crimes lingers. Moving on to the next case. Ellie Wyke. In this video, we reveal the tragic story of a young woman who became the focus of a relentless obsession. This is the story of Ellie Wyke. Ellen Wyke lives in West Ohio. She is 23 years old and is called Ellie by everyone. Ellie relocated to Westchester with her family from Minneapolis, Minnesota. She now lives alone with her pet gecko, Gale. The people she left behind described her as a free-spirited artist who loved music, art, nature, and color. She frequently met up with friends to scrapbook, dance, make jewelry, or write. She adored being outdoors. Her mother said that ever since she was a little girl, you could always find her planting things and setting up hammocks outside in her nicest clothes. She was preparing for many exciting events and had recently earned her hairdressing license. But as summer 2018 approached, her usually cheerful disposition was being tested to its limits. She was receiving strange messages and direct messages, DMs, from someone she did not know using fake phone numbers, odd usernames, Snapchat accounts, and Instagram and Facebook profiles. It had happened previously, but rarely, for nearly a year. Now it occurred constantly. The way they communicated convinced her it was the same person, even though they used different channels and devices. The frightening incidents escalated when Ellie received part of a video on Facebook that had been filmed just outside her house. To record her, the person touched and exposed themselves while sitting at her kitchen table and watching her. Several more videos similar to this followed. Just when it seemed the messages were terrifying enough, things took a much darker turn. How had this person reached her house? Hannah, her closest friend, described it as a serious and sick game of cat and mouse. That was enough for Ellie. She contacted the police. There was one username or number, Mickey or Mika, that she reported to them. Did she care about that name? They asked. Ellie explained that Michael was the name of an ex-boyfriend from years ago, but she had no idea who was behind this. The police filed a report, and Ellie asked them what she should do next. She was advised to learn self-defense and remain indoors at night. Ellie felt defeated and uncertain that this would help. Yet, she still agreed and enrolled in classes with her mother, Tam. But the harassment continued. The police were unable to determine where the messages were originating because the phone numbers were fake and came from websites with unusual area codes. It would take time to go through all of this digital information. Not long after Ellie called, Tam, her mother, called again to ask them to record more details. The officers went to Ellie's house and walked around the neighborhood twice that week, but they did not observe anything bad. The police records, however, show that both searches lasted under 5 minutes. At some point, Ellie did not want to stay at home by herself, so her friends rotated who would sleep over. It was clear, though, that this person did not mind approaching her house, and she could not truly feel safe until they were caught. What do you do in this situation? Her friend asked her one time. I wish I knew how to help. She said, I do not know. And she looked sad. I am by myself and do not know how to defend myself well. It is making me feel very anxious. One day, Ellie was talking to a friend about everything that was happening when both of them had an epiphany. Through a new Snapchat account. The account was created for Mikey, whose real name is Michael Strauss and was Ellie's ex-boyfriend. Ellie thought it could not be him at first, but when she saw the username, she knew it was. Damn it, I know who it is. She texted her friend right away, my ex-boyfriend from when I was 17 years old. He and Ellie broke up a long time ago. They both liked music, the arts, and events. And at first they had much in common, but things quickly turned bad, and she stopped speaking to him. She told the police what she had discovered. On July 28th, she texted Nate, an online friend. They had both spoken about meeting in person many times, and had even set a date for that day. He said, I am not bringing my phone. Is it cool if I just knock? But it appeared Ellie had changed her mind, and now only wanted to stay home. Nate did ask, what is this I am hearing about some creep following you? She responded, LOL. No one is creepy to me, so I do not know. She told him she was alone when he asked what she was doing. As usual, she did not have any friends over, so she was going to bed by herself. Although Ellie believed she was talking to Nate, it turned out to be another fake number and name, and Michael Strauss now knew she was home alone. She locked everything up and taped her curtains, as she always does. On August 1st, 2018, Ellie's mother, Tam, reported her to the police because no one could reach her over the following days. No one questioned that this had anything to do with the stalking. Her car remained parked outside her house, and neither her phone nor her bank cards had been used. One question for the police was whether Ellie's phone had been examined to try to locate her stalker before she was reported missing, but the Westchester police would not say. It was determined that her case was not classified as stalking, but as telecommunications abuse. One of the numbers linked to Nate had a 213 area code. The number had been purchased online, but it had no history and was not connected to any other phone. Furthermore, it had not been used since Ellie disappeared. Detectives obtained some information from the website where the number had been purchased over the next 2 weeks while searching for Ellie. They were able to retrieve the account's username, sign-up date, last login date, and email address. It all pointed to her ex-boyfriend, Michael Strauss. Over the past 10 years, Michael had been arrested for public misconduct, drug possession, identity theft, and burglary. Since the individual was charged with public indecency in June 2015, He was required to undergo a mental health evaluation and 1 year of treatment following the charge. In the 53 minutes since the last message to Ellie, he had also created new phone numbers to contact other people and even registered a new account on the same website. Tragically, she was found on August 24th, less than a month after being reported missing. Her body was discovered in a field off Oral Road. She was naked, wrapped in a blanket, bound with tape, and had a plastic bag over her head. This caused her death. She could not breathe. Michael lived just across the field from where she was found. At 4 a.m. the following day, Westchester police arrested him. He was held on a $4 million bond while officers searched his house and examined all of his electronics. The police obtained information from Google showing that an IP address linked to Michael's home had searched for, "How long does a dead body smell?" Missing girl in Hamilton and missing girl in Westchester, Ohio. Many people used Google to look up Ellie Wyke and the Cincinnati Strangler 3 times. On July 18th, just a few days before she went missing, searches for how to survive prison and a survivor's guide to prison were more frequent. How to delete photos from an iCloud account ranked second. Searches for teen-forced porn and forced rape while jogging were also noted. The police said other searches he conducted were so disturbing that they would not be released publicly. He had been following joggers in parks and in cars for months and had filmed many of them. Investigators also found a photo of the field where Ellie's body was discovered on Michael's phone. The image came from the Maps app. Michael appeared unconcerned and offered a vague explanation that he was studying for a script he was writing, as he worked in the film industry. The most damning evidence found at his home was in his art portfolio: Ellie's driver's license, a lock of her hair, and her pink necklace. Those questioning Michael were growing tired of his arrogance and wanted the truth. He told the police it was all an accident when confronted with the evidence. He claimed Ellie had agreed to help him make a torture film, which he said was part of his professional work and earned him substantial income. He stated that she died of suffocation during filming, with a plastic bag over her head. He claimed the cameras were already recording when he accidentally captured her death on film. He said he watched it, deleted it, and discarded the memory card. If that video ever existed, it has never been recovered. During a search of his basement, police discovered a bed still fitted with handcuffs. Detectives did not believe for a moment that Ellie had agreed to anything like this, but it illustrated a very frightening account of how she died. It was evident that Michael had forced her out of her house and taken her to his own. 9 charges were filed against 29-year-old Michael Strauss by a grand jury. These included aggravated murder, 3 counts of tampering with evidence, menacing by stalking, petty theft, abuse of a body, and gross abuse of a corpse. A memorial service for Ellie was held on September 1st. Everyone was asked to wear tie-dye and bring an item to contribute to a scrapbook. Someone could bring a drum and play music. The entire day was dedicated to the things Ellie loved. Any funds raised were intended to plant a tree in her honor. The following day, a party was held to celebrate her life. The investigation took a long time, and over 800 pages of evidence were submitted to the court. When Michael appeared in court, his defense team presented their theory about how they believed Ellie had died. Although he admitted to the act, they requested access to her medical records and therapist's notes. They did not elaborate further, but implied that her emotional distress may have caused her to misuse medication, potentially contributing to her death. The prosecutor described this as not only a confusing argument, but also offensive given the condition in which she was found in the field and the autopsy results. However, Michael Strauss ultimately admitted to killing Ellie, eliminating the need for a trial. 6 of the original charges against him were dropped, so a guilty plea resulted in a lighter sentence. At the time of sentencing, Michael said little, while David, Ellie's father, stated, "My God tells me to forgive, but he does not say when, and I do not know if I ever will." Michael's mother spoke to Ellie's family, expressed remorse for everything that had happened, and said she felt ill over it. The judge imposed the maximum sentence possible, yet it remained deeply painful for Ellie's family and friends. Michael received 17.5 years in prison, 15 years to life for murder, 18 months for menacing by stalking, and 1 year for abuse of a dead body. The sentences are to be served consecutively, with credit for time already served. He will only be eligible for release twice, first in 2036 and then again in 2041. It was unfortunate that Michael's case did not call for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, but the judge had no authority to change that. Many people still cannot understand what motivated him to commit this act. The prosecutors stated that they could only speculate, but they believed the motive for the crime was pure evil. The strange movie Mr. Strauss wrote, directed, and produced was entirely his own work. That is correct. This case reads like a crime novel, a frightening crime story. It is both terrifying and heartbreaking that she complied with everything asked of her, yet it still occurred. What was the point of that? Asked Hannah, her closest friend. An internal review of how Ellie's numerous calls to the police were handled resulted in the Westchester police chief suspending an officer without pay for 40 hours because he violated protocol. Officer James Thomas failed to properly record information or conduct an investigation when Ellie filed her report on April 11, 2018. Officer Thomas needed to work more carefully and pay greater attention to the details of this case in order to keep the victim safe. But that did not occur. Part of the report indicated that it did not note that Ellie had an ex-boyfriend named Michael, nor did it record his last name or address. The connection to the names Mikey or M was not investigated. The report did not include the emails and videos Ellie provided. The officer did not document that he received an email from Ellie on May 1, 2018, along with additional texts. He also failed to scan the messages, record them, or enter them into the file. According to court documents, Michael Strauss is also a suspect in several other crimes. One of Michael's former inmates stated that he claimed to have killed a woman named Shelley and disposed of her body in a creek. He recounted it in the same manner he described Ellie's murder. However, the Westchester police could not verify this and do not know the identity of this person. In January 2018, a man wearing a black hoodie and face mask attacked a woman who was trail running. As she ran her usual route, the man grabbed her by the face and neck, pulled her into some grass, and told her to be quiet. She pushed him away and managed to escape. Observing and following female runners was something Michael was particularly interested in, as evidenced by his numerous videos. This is likely why the police suspect his involvement. Given that Michael had already demonstrated he was dangerous and unstable, it raises questions about how many people he may have harmed. Approximately 13.5 million people are stalked in the United States each year. Nearly 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have been stalked at some point in their lives. In 94% of murder cases, stalking behavior is present in various forms. One police officer remarked that stalking is much like witnessing a murder unfold very slowly. Ellie's mother, Tam, said that whenever her mind is not occupied, thoughts of her daughter emerge. As Ellie took her last breath, I can still sense the fear and terror she must have experienced while looking at her killer through the plastic, with tape around her neck and arms. She noted that it was clear Ellie Wyke had a profound impact on many lives. We just wanted to bring some color back into the darkness, her cousin said. To be honest, I do not think there will ever be complete peace. Day by day, it becomes easier to cope, but true peace will never come. Ellie has always been part of this family, and always will be. We will see her again. That is something we know. It may be a long time before that happens. There was a rainbow over the field where her body was found, and the sun was shining directly where she lay. Her family has always interpreted this as a sign that she was with them that day, letting them know everything would be okay and expressing gratitude for finding her. It reminds them to always notice the good and the color, even when circumstances are very dark and gray. Moving on to the next case. Jessica Gallagher. In today's video, we reveal the terrifying case of a young woman whose life was taken in a brutal act of violence. Let's begin. Jessica Gallagher, age 27, lived in Austin, Texas. She worked 2 jobs, was pursuing her master's degree, and constantly kept busy with her friends and family after graduating from Texas State University. She was employed at the local grocery store and also as a substitute teacher, but she eventually wanted to obtain a permanent job at an elementary school. She was also saving money for her master's degree and to pay down her student loans. Jessica had many responsibilities and carried a lot of stress, but she consistently kept a positive outlook and believed that her situation would not remain this way much longer. One of her friends recalled that Jessica once wrote, "Someday everything will make sense. Keep reminding yourself that everything happens for a reason. Laugh through the chaos and smile even when tears fall." After a long day, Jessica was cheerful, motivated, and enjoyable to spend time with. She had plenty of things she was excited about. Now, returning to the story. On September 7th, 2009, Labor Day, Jessica spent the day with her cousin and closest friend Melanie, along with several others. The group enjoyed a barbecue and swam in the pool since the weather was so hot outside. After several hours by the pool, the group went to a diner because she had to drive everyone back. Work awaited the next day, and she needed to save money. Jessica did not want to drink more than a few. When evening came, the group decided to go to a bar to play pool. The group left the bar shortly after midnight, and Jessica started driving everyone back home. Melanie remained the last passenger in the car at 1:30 a.m. and asked Jessica if she wanted to spend the night at her house. Jessica declined because she wanted to make sure she was prepared for her shift when she woke in the morning. On her way home, she needed to pick up food for her dog and check on them as well. She hugged Melanie goodbye and then went to the nearby Walmart. After a few hours had passed, Melanie's phone rang while the rest of them were preparing for work. Someone from Jessica's workplace had called. Jessica had never arrived. At first, this alarmed Melanie immediately because Jessica never skipped work or even called in sick. Even though Melanie contacted several more people, everyone said they had not heard from her. Deep inside, she knew something was terribly wrong. John, who was Melanie's brother, lived with Jessica, but he was equally stunned to hear this. John worked as a police officer, and his shift started at 5:30 a.m. He neither saw nor heard her in the apartment, so he assumed she was asleep and they had simply not crossed paths. When he returned home, one of her dogs greeted him right away. The dog seemed uneasy that she was absent, and it appeared she had not been back since the day before. John informed his colleagues that she was missing when he called them. Immediately, he arranged for them to trace her phone, and the signal pinged near the Cedar Park intersection of U.S. Highway 183 and Walton Way. This place was far from isolated. Numerous businesses surrounded the area, and at that time of day, many vehicles and people were present. It was possible that her phone had died or she had lost her temper. Melanie and her boyfriend Sergey rushed to the location and quickly spotted her white Kia. It was parked neatly in a row outside of Little Caesars. As soon as they exited their car, a terrible odor struck them. The windows were rolled up, but it remained extremely hot inside since the outside temperature was 90 degrees. Within the car, Jessica was slumped in the driver's seat, which was adjusted much farther back than it normally would have been. She was unresponsive, and what appeared to be feces was smeared throughout the vehicle. When her car door was opened, the smell became even more overwhelming. Melanie attempted to wake Jessica by touching her head, but she did not react. The sun had scorched her skin red, leaving marks across her body and soaking her hair with sweat. Sergey phoned the police. Jessica Gallagher had been murdered. It appeared someone had tied something tightly across her neck, and there were small lacerations on her eyes, her face, and her neck. She also had bruises and abrasions spread across her entire body. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled twice, once with a piece of fabric, possibly the strap from her dress, which she had worn over her swimsuit, and again by someone's hands. Scratches on her neck from her own fingernails revealed that she had tried clawing back in an effort to fight off her attacker. Her wallet, cards, and car keys were stolen, but the offender kept her phone to examine it. Police initiated their search around the nearby stores and restaurants because this area was highly active and visible to the public. When one worker arrived early that morning, she observed Jessica still alive. She was unclothed and crawling inside her vehicle as though she were attempting to put her swimsuit back on. Shortly afterward, the worker saw her again. This time Jessica was seated outside her vehicle, playing with her hair and wearing her white dress. On the third and final sighting, she was back in the car, speaking to herself and making odd hand gestures. Several other witnesses who came across Jessica reported that she looked exhausted and disoriented. Although no one spoke directly to her, her behavior appeared highly unusual and erratic. The next time anyone saw her, she was already dead. Melanie explained that Jessica had neither exercised nor used any drugs before leaving. When the toxicology results were returned, they confirmed there were no drugs, alcohol, or medications in her system at all. Not only was the situation becoming stranger and more complicated, but investigators also needed to uncover why she had been acting in such an odd way. In the back of her car was a large bag of dog food. Melanie told detectives Jessica had planned to purchase it, so they realized it had been bought that morning. Directly across from her car was a Walmart that stayed open 24 hours a day. Surveillance confirmed Jessica had driven into the Walmart parking lot at 2:30. She entered the store alone, wearing a red baseball cap and a white dress. She carried her bag slung over her shoulder. Inside, Jessica moved around normally. She showed no signs of acting strangely, stumbling, or struggling in any way. Nobody approached her to speak, and it did not appear that anyone was paying her attention. Before leaving, she walked directly to the dog food aisle, then headed to the checkout. As she exited, an employee working near the doors observed her. But this is when things shifted. Until that moment, no one inside had been following her. Suddenly, a tall man wearing a brown shirt and a baseball cap seemed to be walking directly behind her. He had entered Walmart just minutes before Jessica arrived. He had parked his small truck far away from her car. He went into the restroom inside, and when he came out, Jessica was right in front of him carrying the large bag of dog food on her shoulder. As Jessica headed back to her Kia, the man who appeared to be following her moved quicker. He was now only about 20 seconds behind her. Her car had been parked directly behind a large tree, which blocked it from the view of most cameras. The only other camera that captured it provided very poor quality footage. His truck, however, remained parked, which indicated the man had walked straight up to her vehicle. He never reappeared on camera. Roughly 2 minutes after she reached her car with the man, the vehicle pulled away and headed toward the exits. The footage was deeply disturbing. Walmart security cameras also captured Jessica's car later when it was stopped near Little Caesars. They recorded the individual exiting, crossing the street, and heading back into the Walmart parking lot. Investigators confirmed it was the same man because he quickly returned to his truck and then drove off at 5:30. About 20 minutes after she had left her car outside Little Caesars, that same man from Walmart used her bank card at an Exxon gas station. Even though Jessica never got out of her car until it was discovered at 2:50 a.m., the vehicle remained parked there until she was found. Because several employees saw her, she must have still been alive for a few hours. It did not make sense at all. Police released portions of the surveillance footage and urged the public to watch for the red pickup truck. Investigators were still searching for suspects, so all they could do was wait for someone to call in. Jessica's funeral took place. Her family revealed that they first learned she had been strangled because the marks on her neck were visible. This made a day that was already unbearable even more painful. Who was responsible for this, and for what reason? Unexpectedly, a woman named Leslie phoned in to speak about the truck. She believed the vehicle belonged to a man named Crispin Harmel, age 37, who was best friends with her fiancé. Leslie explained that Crispin had been expected to bring money to their apartment only hours before Jessica was discovered, but he never arrived. She considered this unusual. She felt compelled to share her concerns because she could not shake her unease. She described feeling like Crispin was part of her family, which made placing that call extremely difficult. At the same time, a young woman had lost her life. Police ran Leslie's information and discovered Crispin had been stopped 3 weeks earlier for an expired license. Body cameras were recording during the traffic stop, clearly showing him driving the same truck and wearing the same baseball cap. Detectives became convinced he was the suspect they were pursuing. Officers visited Crispin's residence 5 days after Jessica's body was located to question him. It was immediately apparent that he had altered the truck's appearance, as areas that had previously been shiny were now painted black. Crispin did not seem shocked that investigators arrived, and he admitted knowing Jessica. He claimed that the website lonelyhousewifehookups.com had connected them for a meeting. According to him, they arranged to meet at the Walmart between 12:30 a.m. and 1 a.m. on the night she was killed after chatting on Messenger. Crispin stated that he and Jessica left together in her car and had sex near a park. He said he was in her car and might have been among the last people to see her alive, but that did not make him a murderer. He explained that although officers did not confront him with it, they knew the footage told a very different story. The last time Crispin and Jessica were seen together was sometime after midnight. Before he entered her car, they had not spoken or even acknowledged one another. When she arrived at Walmart, her actions suggested she was not there to meet anyone either. She was only there to purchase dog food, nothing more. It was obvious they had no connection, so his version of events collapsed immediately. He later claimed she had driven him back to Walmart, where they chatted briefly. According to him, he told her about struggling to pay his gas bills, and she allegedly handed him her bank card, writing the pin directly on his hand. When he learned the next day that Jessica had died, he told himself, "I was just with this girl, and now she is dead." That was not supposed to happen. Out of fear that he would be suspected, he altered the appearance of his truck and discarded her bank card. Detectives recognized the story was extremely convoluted because of how confident he seemed in recounting it. Melanie and her friends testified that Jessica never mentioned going out with anyone that night. She was always straightforward. If she had arranged to meet someone late at night whom she did not know, she would have informed others where she was going and with whom. Both of their phones and computers were thoroughly examined, and no record of communication between them was ever discovered. In addition, Jessica had never visited the website he claimed she used. It was, however, proven that he had been searching her name, looking at photographs, and reading about her only hours after she was found dead. Investigators concluded Crispin had followed her outside, forced his way into her car, compelled her to drive to a park, sexually assaulted and strangled her twice, then drove her vehicle back to the parking lot, abandoned her for dead, and stole her card. As soon as officers confronted him with what was visible on surveillance footage, Crispin went silent and requested a lawyer. Detectives were convinced he was the one who killed Jessica, but they still could not account for what occurred between the moment he parked her car and the time she was discovered dead. No one else had been near her car, and he had not returned to it either. Even though she did not harm herself, she was still alive after Crispin left the scene. It was utter chaos. At that stage, investigators lacked enough evidence to charge him with murder, but they did have sufficient proof to indict him for perjury. In May 2010, he received a 10-year sentence after pleading guilty. The murder investigation remained open, and detectives reviewed every detail repeatedly. Eventually, they uncovered something that might help clarify matters. A researcher from the Indiana University School of Medicine had published an article discussing victims who were strangled and then died hours later due to the lingering effects of asphyxiation. This type of death does not occur instantly. It can last for hours. It is described as delayed death from strangulation. Experts explained that this was a likely cause of her bizarre behavior outside the vehicle and the presence of feces inside as well. The 2 episodes of strangulation had caused such severe damage to her brain that she no longer understood what was happening or where she was. She could not call for assistance or operate her phone. Lying under the scorching sun for so long also brought on heat stroke. This combination made her condition completely fatal. First, the brain starts shutting down because it is not receiving enough oxygenated blood, leading to unconsciousness. Forensic medicine specialist Dr. Bill Smock noted that seizures could follow soon after. Within at least 15 seconds, brain cells begin to die. Initially, bladder control is lost. Then, control of the lower back muscles disappears. The brainstem, which regulates heartbeat and breathing, is the final part of the brain to fail. However, functions like personality and memory reside in higher brain areas. Evidence clearly showed that Crispin had strangled her twice, mistakenly believing she was dead when she was merely unconscious. In May 2013, he was formally indicted for capital murder, as it became evident that his intent was to kill her, and the evidence strongly supported this. He pleaded not guilty. No DNA linked Crispin to Jessica, which the defense believed strengthened their argument. Yet given the extreme heat of that day, this was unsurprising. Severe heat and humidity can rapidly degrade DNA, making it unlikely that anything conclusive would have been recovered from her body. The prosecution was not concerned because there was overwhelming evidence recorded on video. No one else could have committed the crime. The state brought in Crispin's former girlfriend, Elizabeth. She testified that he told her his apartment had burned down and that he had lost his phone in the fire. In truth, investigators had seized his phone as part of the investigation. He also claimed his truck had broken down, but in reality, it too had been impounded. Public outrage followed when the trial ended in a mistrial because prosecutors were accused of concealing evidence. Everything returned to the beginning. District Attorney Jana Duty was later jailed for violating a gag order and was also disciplined by the State Bar of Texas for misconduct. Several years later, she was discovered dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Crispin's second trial began in the spring of 2018, nearly a decade after Jessica's death. This time, the jury carried out its duty and convicted Crispin Harmel of capital murder. Because the state chose not to pursue the death penalty, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He attempted to appeal his conviction in 2020, but the ruling was upheld. He remains incarcerated, serving the same sentence. Jessica had enjoyed her evening with friends that night. When she returned to her car in the morning, she looked forward to getting home, feeding her dogs, and preparing for work. Her master's degree was within reach, and she had much waiting ahead of her. John, Jessica's cousin, expressed that he had hoped the arrest and conviction would bring peace of mind, but it did not, because nothing could undo what happened. She lost her life, yet he still gets to live. He said her father once remarked that so much was taken away that day. He stole my chance to walk her down the aisle. I know she would have been a wonderful mother. I miss her deeply. Melanie explained that grief feels different every day when you lose someone, but because of what she witnessed in the parking lot, even good memories are often overshadowed. Life will never feel complete again. Something will always be missing. Moving on to the next case. Lavender Doe. Perhaps it was the jarring contrast of the corpse's flawless teeth alongside the inhumane circumstances of her discovery that disturbed internet sleuths so profoundly. For many, the amount of attention devoted to the unidentified young woman's dental care stood in stark opposition to the visible brutality of her final moments. Found burned beyond recognition in the early hours of October 29, 2006, near Longview, the two men who came upon her body initially believed it to be a mannequin that had been set on fire, until closer inspection revealed the grim truth. The smell was the first sign that alerted them to the horrifying reality. Gasoline combined with the unmistakable odor of charred human flesh. It was not a mannequin, but the body of a human being who had apparently been set ablaze only minutes before their unexpected arrival. The remains were already burned too extensively for survival, and the men understood the victim was beyond medical aid. They alerted authorities, who arrived, secured the scene, and took custody of the unidentified body. Yet what should have been the grim but straightforward task of comparing missing persons records with the remains quickly stalled, as no reports bore any resemblance to the description of the victim, and no inquiries were made regarding the body of the seemingly well-kept young adult. The medical examiner determined the body most likely belonged to a female between 17 and 25 years old, based on anatomical measurements of the remains. However, the extensive fire damage rendered any other means of identification nearly impossible. Discovered with $40 still in her pocket, she was given the name Lavender Doe, inspired by the light purple shirt she had been wearing at the time she was found. The jeans on her body were partially intact, and investigators identified them as a size 7 to 8 from the clothing brand One Tough Babe. Although seminal fluid was detected inside her, the medical examiner was unable to conclusively determine its origin. These details, especially her flawless teeth, became the central clue in unraveling the mystery of what had happened to the unidentified victim. In 2015, a Reddit user going by the handle Oblivion's Kiss began posting annually on the subreddit r/unresolved mysteries. The user referred to Lavender Doe as the girl with the perfect smile. Each post drew renewed attention, sparking a collective effort to rule out potential matches as they surfaced. Despite the lack of solid leads, the case refused to fade entirely. Something about Lavender Doe resonated deeply with the online true crime community. In particular, her story captured the dedication of 3 volunteers with the DNA Doe Project. Kevin Lord, 35, was an amateur private investigator pursuing formal training in the field. Missy Koski, 55, known as the Search Angel, had a reputation for reuniting adoptees with their biological families. Lori Gaff, 49, was a self-taught genealogy expert, gifted with an almost photographic memory and an insatiable appetite for knowledge. Together, these 3 unpaid volunteers devoted themselves to uncovering Lavender Doe's identity. After traveling long distances to meet in Austin, Texas, the trio organized the mountain of information they had collected through countless Facebook exchanges and set to work. The online posts about Lavender Doe consistently drew international attention, with people suggesting names that could often be conclusively ruled out. Again and again, it all circled back to her teeth. The public was captivated by the fact that she had no cavities or fillings. Some speculated she might have been related to a dentist. Another striking clue was the presence of 2 baby teeth she had retained, despite clearly having gone through puberty. That unusual feature became a key tool for Kevin, Missy, and Lori in ruling out suggested matches. They interviewed the families of numerous missing girls, but none fit. Relying on both advanced genealogical testing and the renewed interest of the online community, they pressed forward, hoping that the answers were hidden within double helixes and strings of genetic code. Law enforcement agencies generally analyze the unique codes of 13 to 20 DNA markers in order to determine parentage, as well as sibling and half-sibling relationships. By contrast, services such as Ancestry DNA and 23andMe compare between 600,000 and 700,000 unique DNA markers, which allows them to inform customers of connections as distant as third or even fourth cousins and beyond. By following these fragile strands of familial connection, anyone with enough intelligence, persistence, and patience to comb through census data, property records, and historical birth certificates can reconstruct a family tree spanning centuries, relying only on information already accessible to the public. With Kevin's strong encouragement, the DNA Doe Project and Reddit together raised $1,400 to have Lavender Doe's DNA rescanned, so as to capture the most comprehensive dataset available. This process encoded more than 600,000 markers in a format suitable for comparison within public databases. However, they first had to wait the many months required for the DNA to be fully processed. Though increasingly popular, this service remained relatively uncommon, making it a slow undertaking. The sheriff's office had previously interviewed a man named Joseph Wayne Burnett, as the seminal fluid found at the scene might have matched his. Detectives, however, kept details about the procedure and timeline of this discovery closely guarded. Burnett admitted that he had picked up and slept with a woman from the area, but denied any further involvement, which led to his release. Then, during the summer of 2018, a 21-year-old woman named Felicia Pearson abruptly disappeared. When Burnett was arrested for failing to register as a sex offender from an earlier charge, detectives were able to extract information from him, revealing that Felicia had recently spent time in the 41-year-old's residence. Her fingernails, painted purple, would ultimately be the detail that led investigators to her body, discovered 5 days after she was first reported missing. Buried beneath a shallow layer of leaves in Longview, the grim find immediately reminded locals of another body discovered in the same area years earlier, also a young woman, back in 2006. Detectives, however, did not have to rely on speculation for long, as the connection was quickly drawn for them. During interrogation, Joseph Burnett broke down, confessing not only to the brutal and senseless murder of Felicia Pearson, but also to that of another innocent woman, killed back in 2006. Although investigators now had him in custody and indicted him on 2 counts of murder in August 2018, his first victim remained without a name. Despite admitting to sexually assaulting and killing her, Burnett claimed he never knew who she was, saying she had only ever known his rage. Then, in October 2018, the determined group of online sleuths finally obtained the raw data they had been anticipating. Lavender Doe's unique genealogical profile had been processed, coded, and made suitable for uploading into public DNA databases. With this dataset in hand, the volunteers began the painstaking work of tracing connections among distant relatives in the hope of moving backward toward a closer relation of Lavender Doe. By leveraging the immense repository of information on the site GeneMatch, the same resource that helped authorities unmask the Golden State Killer, the amateur detectives turned semi-professionals were able to identify thousands of distant relatives linked to Lavender Doe. Most crucially, they discovered a second cousin once removed, along with several third and fourth cousin matches. Many of these extended relatives shared Czech ancestry. A volunteer with the DNA Doe Project traced the lineage further, successfully identifying and translating original birth records from the Czech Republic to piece together the identities of 2 of the young woman's likely ancestors. This final connection would ultimately be the breakthrough in the case, as documents revealed a relative sharing the same ancestors who was currently living in East Texas, only 30 miles from where Lavender Doe had been discovered. Although hesitant at first, the newly identified distant relative agreed to cooperate with both the DNA Doe Project and the Sheriff's Department. While she, a woman in her late 50s, reported no knowledge of any missing family members, she consented to provide a DNA sample for comparison with Lavender Doe. The test revealed enough genetic similarity for detectives to conclude that the unidentified girl was the first cousin once removed of the East Texas woman. This revelation allowed investigators to track down additional living relatives connected to her. They learned that the woman's uncle once had a daughter named Robin, who had passed away at the age of 50, just 1 month before Lavender Doe's tragic death. By examining county records and public newspaper archives, detectives and volunteers traced Robin to 3 former husbands, one of whom bore the last name Dodd. Using Robin's first name in combination with this newly uncovered surname, Kevin, the aspiring private investigator, accessed a preview from a People Finder website showing that Robin might have been married to a man named Johnny Dodd. A brief search of Johnny's name revealed that he had a daughter who would have been around the same age as the unidentified young woman. When Kevin entered the possible daughter's name into the system, he remembered feeling chills upon discovering that her social security number was inactive, a strong indication that she was deceased. Further digging led him to a MySpace profile belonging to one of her relatives, which in turn linked him to a page under the missing girl's own name. The profile, last active in 2006, was filled with the hallmarks of a teenager's online presence from that era: grainy, low-resolution photos, images of a girl in miniskirts surrounded by the color pink, snapshots with her dog, and her strawberry blonde hair glinting in the light. The pieces were falling into place, her profile having last been active in the year 2006. The same year her body was found charred beyond recognition, but with perfect teeth. Dana Lynn Dodd was 21 when she was killed. Last seen in front of Walmart, her confessed killer says that she attempted to sell him magazine subscription and then claims she subsequently offered to sell him lingerie from a magazine. While he claims he declined the offer, he goes on to state that she then asked to get into his truck and later agreed to be intimate with him in exchange for money. Her killer claims that she tried to rob him and that he strangled her in retribution and that he left her with $40 in her pocket as a symbolic payment of sorts. Burnett's assertions of a supposed sexual encounter and a robbery gone wrong are implausible at best, and many are convinced that he murdered her in cold blood after sexually assaulting her, drawing strong parallels to the more recent killing of 21-year-old Felicia, which Burnett also confessed to. Investigators eventually managed to contact Dana Dodd's closest living relative, though her half-sister Amanda, 9 years her senior and living nearly 900 miles away, admitted they were not close toward the end. The long years of silence had weighed heavily on her. Once DNA testing confirmed their half-sibling connection, Amanda was finally freed from the haunting question of what had become of Dana. Neither the daughter of a dentist nor a child with any sense of stability or continuity, Dana drifted from one guardian to another, eventually residing with her stepmother until she turned 14. By that age, the relationship began to deteriorate, and since her stepmother had no biological or legal ties to Dana, she sent her to live with her half-sister, 23-year-old Amanda in Florida, whom she had only met a handful of times before. Despite both sisters being so young, Amanda willingly welcomed a family member who was so clearly in need of attention. So neglected was Dana that when she arrived in Florida, all she carried was a small backpack containing her scant belongings. At first, Dana adjusted well to life with Amanda, and the arrangement seemed to work, but before long, teenage rebellion overcame her initial good intentions. And despite her older half-sister enrolling her in counseling and trying to offer some semblance of normal life, Dana soon chose to leave and live with Amanda's full brother, who was also Dana's half-brother. That arrangement also collapsed, as drugs, partying, and divided loyalties drove Dana further away from her family. Eventually, when the situation became too overwhelming for everyone involved, Dana decided to leave altogether. With nowhere else to go, her life quickly shifted into that of a runaway. She eventually moved in with her best friend, but soon left that home as well, choosing instead to travel with a group of acquaintances and attempt to sell magazine subscriptions in exchange for room and board, an arrangement that was clearly a manipulative pyramid scheme targeting vulnerable young adults. This magazine-selling operation verged on human trafficking, with food being withheld when sales quotas were not met and rumors circulating about drugs and violence. It was within this environment that Dana would tragically cross paths with the man who would become her killer. Her older sister reflects on Dana's final moments with both pity and a conflicted sense of understanding. She believes Dana willingly got into the stranger's car because she likely felt she had nowhere else to turn. Amanda remarked, "I think after all these years, she thought she had nobody. I think that's why she didn't reach out to us. I did my best. I feel like I didn't do enough." Lavender-colored mums now rest on the headstone of the once unnamed victim. While Minnie and her immediate family passed away before ever knowing the truth, society can take a measure of solace in the fact that one more predator who targeted young women, is now off the streets. On December 15, 2020, Burnett pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder, as well as a separate sexual offense charge related to his prior sex offender status. He was sentenced to 3 concurrent 50-year prison terms, with credit for the 2 years already served, and is currently incarcerated at the George Beto Unit in Tennessee Colony, Texas. Burnett will become eligible for parole after serving 25 years in 2043. Moving on to the next case. Shauna Taillefer. In today's video, we reveal the disturbing case of a man who believed he had orchestrated the perfect murder. Shauna Taillefer returned home from work at about 3:30 in the morning after finishing a late shift. As she pulled into her garage, the streets were still and calm, giving no sign of danger. But someone was already inside, concealed in the shadows. She walked into her house, likely expecting nothing more than a few hours of rest. Soon after, tragedy struck. By sunrise, police had swarmed her home, and what they uncovered stunned the entire community. Shauna was born on March 13, 1966, in Salt Lake City, Utah. She grew up in a Mormon town surrounded by snow-covered mountains and long-standing traditions. She was the youngest of 7 siblings and displayed creativity from an early age. Shauna often immersed herself in books or sketched flowers with precision. She loved school, not just for academics, but for the connections she made. Her upbeat personality made her well-liked, and she thrived as a cheerleader with a wide circle of friends. During her teenage years, the family relocated first to Pennsylvania and then to North Carolina. Each move strengthened Shauna's independence and fueled her determination to carve her own path. In 1994, at the age of 28, Shauna pursued her dream of independence by moving west to Las Vegas, Nevada, a city defined by constant reinvention. Las Vegas, the dazzling city of lights and fortune, was bursting with energy when Shauna arrived. She began her new life working at a high-end department store, where her warmth and charm made her a natural with customers. Later, she transitioned into the hotel industry, starting as a waitress at the Fiesta Hotel. Her hard work and charisma eventually earned her a coveted position at the Palms Casino Resort. Surrounded by luxury and high-profile clientele, Shauna thrived. Her co-workers became like a second family, and her career provided both joy and stability. With her sun-kissed blonde hair, elegant style, and graceful presence, Shauna carried an aura that naturally drew attention. People admired her, but it wasn't because of her appearance. It was because of her kindness, her humor, and her genuine ability to connect with others. Friends described her as full of energy, positive energy and love, and said she found magic in everyday life. When Shauna met George Taillefer in 2002, her world shifted once more. He made an immediate impression with his tall frame, athletic build, and confidence. His background was equally impressive. A former high school football star and prom king, a graduate of West Point, and later a U.S. Army engineer who went on to become a firefighter. He carried a magnetic charm and a generous heart, known for acts like covering his mother's expenses while she cared for his disabled sister. Their connection was instant and powerful. Friends and relatives were struck by how perfectly the 2 ambitious, vibrant personalities seemed destined for each other. When their daughter Madison was born, their love story only deepened. Motherhood became Shauna's greatest joy. She adored Madison, spending countless hours singing karaoke, laughing together, and creating lasting memories. On March 16, 2006, Shauna and George sealed their love with a beach wedding in Hawaii. The setting, with waves crashing and warm breezes all around, felt like the ending of a fairy tale. Yet beneath the beauty, cracks had already begun to show. 2 years into the marriage, signs of strain became obvious. The 2008 housing market crash struck George hard, and financial losses rippled through their relationship. Money differences deepened the divide. Shauna enjoyed spending, while George preferred saving. What had once been minor disagreements grew into frequent, heated arguments. George's frustration took a darker turn as he became distant, demanding, and critical. His cutting words, especially when spoken in front of Madison, left even deeper wounds. Matters worsened when George grew close to Null Stevens, a homeless man he had brought into their lives to help with yard work. George had always shown compassion toward people facing hardship, but Shauna never trusted Stevens. His constant presence unsettled her, adding even more strain to their emotional struggles. As the months passed, The situation between Shauna and George worsened until the bond that once held them finally gave way. After nearly 10 years together, Shauna made the painful decision to leave the relationship, taking their daughter Madison with her. She relocated to a quiet suburb just outside Las Vegas, hoping that space and time would bring her clarity. Shauna had stepped back, but she hadn't given up completely. Divorce wasn't yet on her mind, as faint traces of hope still lingered in her heart. With support and time, perhaps they could still repair the damage. Both she and George agreed to attend marriage counseling as a last attempt to save what remained of their relationship. Although the sessions provided moments for reflection, they failed to close the emotional divide. Shauna and George continued living separately, and as the days went by, the idea of reconciliation grew more unlikely. By September 2012, Shauna's hope had begun to fade. The future she once dreamed of seemed to slip further away with each day. Then something unsettling occurred, shattering any sense of security she still had. One night, Shauna returned home from work to find her house in chaos. Someone had broken in, scattering her belongings, rifling through her clothes, and taking personal items such as her engagement ring, underwear, a bikini, and a black dress. Stranger still, the intruder had taken vodka from the refrigerator and left a small pair of folded boxers on the washing machine. The violation cut deeply, leaving Shauna shaken. It didn't feel like a random break-in. It seemed personal, as though the person knew them. Though she tried to move forward by focusing on work and caring for Madison, the lingering unease never fully disappeared. At 3:01 a.m. on September 29, 2012, Shauna clocked out of her shift at the casino and exited through the staff doors into the quiet Las Vegas night. She quickly got into her car and began the familiar 30-minute drive home. It was a route she had taken countless times, but this would be the last. Around 3:30 a.m., Shauna arrived at her house, pulled into the garage, and entered through the interior door. She never noticed the figure waiting silently in the dark. As she walked upstairs, a sudden, brutal blow from a hammer struck her head, knocking her to the ground. The assault continued relentlessly. Even as Shauna pleaded for her life, crying and terrified, the attacker gave no response. She asked again and again, "Why are you doing this?" But only more hammer strikes followed. When her body finally went still, the killer fled through the same garage door she had used moments earlier, taking the weapon with him. A few hours later, just after 9 a.m., George finished his shift at the fire station. As usual, he picked up Madison from his mother's house, since Shauna had worked late the night before. He then drove to Shauna's home to gather some of their daughter's belongings. The moment he arrived, something felt wrong. The garage door was open, a detail that alarmed him immediately. Shauna was meticulous and never left it open overnight. Inside, George's worst fears materialized. The house was in disarray, showing clear signs of a violent struggle. When he looked closer, he found Shauna lying motionless on the floor, blood pooled around her. Shaken, he called 911 to report what he had found. Some later claimed his voice sounded oddly calm, though he stumbled at points and mentioned Madison, asking if he could take her to his mother's. First responders arrived quickly and confirmed the horrific scene. Shauna lay dead on the floor, her body bloodied, with the home ransacked around her. The brutality of the attack stunned investigators. Shauna's head injuries were so severe that first responders initially believed she had been shot. A closer examination, however, revealed the wounds came from repeated, violent strikes with a blunt weapon. In her final moments, she had fought desperately, leaving her hands bruised and torn. Her courage in the face of such violence was undeniable. Detectives first turned their focus to George, as is standard in domestic homicide cases, but he had an airtight alibi. He had been on duty for a full 24-hour shift at the fire station, a fact confirmed by both colleagues and supervisors. With that lead closed, investigators shifted their focus elsewhere. Shauna's friends and co-workers were horrified by the news. Many, who also worked late shifts at the Palms Casino Resort, were left shaken, fearful that the seemingly random, brutal nature of the attack could target them too. The earlier burglary at Shauna's home resurfaced in their minds. Had it been random, or was it a warning sign of something planned? That break-in 3 weeks earlier, when thieves had taken her underwear, bikini, and engagement ring but left behind a neatly folded pair of men's boxers on her washing machine, had felt chillingly personal. Neighbors later reported hearing a series of heavy, rhythmic thuds between 3:30 and 4 a.m., the same time Shauna had arrived home, suggesting the assault happened almost immediately after she entered. Not long after, more evidence appeared along a trail near the Willowbrook apartments, just half a mile from her house. Discarded items belonging to Shauna, her cell phone, health card, and makeup, were found scattered, hinting that her killer had fled on foot in that direction. Soon, a new name entered the investigation. William Big Will Penix, a Las Vegas handyman with a reputation for assisting recently released convicts. One of them, a man named Hart, made a shocking remark in a tone far too casual to be safe. Hart spoke about striking a woman with a hammer and smiled as he described it. The blow had been so forceful it broke the hammer. When Big Will first heard about Shauna's murder on the news, he didn't know what to think, but then the details started lining up. He immediately called the police and told them that Hart frequently loitered at a nearby Albertsons and sold drugs across the street at a Chevron gas station. Officers located him at one of his usual drug-dealing spots. Hart was arrested on the spot while carrying narcotics. His real name turned out to be Noel Stevens. It was not the first time that name had come up. Stevens had a history of drug charges, prowling, and petty theft. Now he was a murder suspect. While being interrogated, he denied any role in Shauna's death, but admitted he had been living in a tent on a hill 8 miles from the Strip. Police then searched his campsite and sent helicopters to scan the area, suspecting he had hidden evidence there. They didn't have to search for long. Inside the tent, they found bloody pants. Forensic testing confirmed what they feared. It was Shauna's blood. The case was tightening, but one question still hung in the air. Why her? Digital records provided the answer. Shockingly, Stevens had been in regular contact with George, the man Shauna had once loved and who was the father of her child. George was linked to her killer in a connection both stronger and darker than anyone had guessed. George had hired Stevens for odd jobs around the house, but was also said to have exploited him, preying on his vulnerability and desperation. For only $600, George set in motion a plan to murder his wife. From the beginning, Shauna's sister Paula had expressed her suspicions. She had never believed George was innocent, even with his seemingly perfect alibi. She flew to Las Vegas to assist with the investigation, certain something far more sinister had occurred behind closed doors. Her instincts proved horrifyingly accurate. When police searched Stevens's campsite, they found strong evidence. Clothes that had been stolen from Shauna's previous break-in and his DNA on a vodka bottle. That bottle was used in the break-in a few weeks before she was killed. A cardboard box tag nearby matched a hammer, which was one of the tools used in the attack. Soon surveillance video proved it. George and Stevens were seen laughing and shopping for a hammer, gloves, and a knife together at a hardware store. What seemed random at first now smelt like it was planned. Stevens admitted to the crime when he saw how much evidence there was. His statement said that George had paid him $600 upfront and offered to pay him thousands more when the job was done. They carefully planned the murder for weeks, and phone records from September 2012 show that they made 87 calls to each other, including 5 the night before the murder. Stevens said that George gave them the keys to Shauna's house, and even suggested that they dress in black and break in ahead of time. Stevens sneaked into the house on the night of September 29th, hid in a room, and waited. As Shauna went up the stairs, a man in a ski mask came out from behind the trees. He hit her with a hammer. When the handle broke, he used the steel head to finish the job. Then he was gone into the night. Later, Stevens led police to the grave where he had thrown away the murder weapon, which was still stained with Shauna's blood. Detectives went to see George's family on October 8th to tell them he was now the main suspect. His mom and sister were shocked by the news and wouldn't believe he could have done something so bad. But George broke under the stress. When he realized the police were closing in, he drove recklessly through Las Vegas at extreme speeds, ultimately striking a concrete barrier with no skid marks or evidence of braking. Authorities suspected a suicide attempt. He survived the crash because he was wearing a seatbelt. At the hospital, George was taken into custody. Both George Stevens and Noel Stevens were charged with murder. Stevens admitted his involvement and testified against George to avoid facing the death penalty, receiving a sentence of 42 years to life. George's trial began in August 2015. Stevens became the prosecution's key witness, despite his troubled past, history of drug use, and ongoing mental health challenges. On the stand, he described a manipulative friend. Stevens stated that George frequently yelled at Shauna, frustrated by her spending and the deterioration of their marriage. Initially, Stevens dismissed George's first offer to have Shauna killed, but when the payment rose to $5,000, he agreed. In reality, Stevens only received the original $600. He later sold Shauna's engagement ring, the same ring taken during the first break-in. Stevens also testified that George specifically demanded a fiberglass-handled hammer, fearing a wooden one would break. Surveillance footage confirmed that they purchased the tools together. In an unusual twist, police had seized the fiberglass hammer in an unrelated case, leaving Stevens with a wooden hammer, which ultimately broke during the attack. During the trial, Stevens' defense team worked tirelessly to discredit him, highlighting his criminal record, drug use, and claims of hearing voices to suggest he was unreliable. They argued that the tools had been purchased solely for household repairs. Yet Stevens' testimony alone wasn't sufficient to convict George. The combination of surveillance footage, phone records, Shauna's blood found on Stevens' belongings, and the timeline all corroborated that Stevens had participated in planning Shauna's murder. The prosecution argued that George was a man consumed by a need for control, unable to tolerate losing dominance over Shauna, the collapse of his marriage, or his financial decline. Those who observed him noted that the control once admired in George had begun to shift into something dangerous. Character witnesses from his family described him as honest and hardworking, yet the evidence told a different story. In 2015, George was convicted of first-degree murder. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 32 to 81 years for related charges. Later, he filed an appeal, claiming that his actions were influenced by a combination of substances, including Adderall, estrogen blockers, and medications prescribed after a work injury. In a handwritten statement, George explained that the drugs impaired his ability to think clearly. He also claimed that his defense attorney had failed him by disregarding his mental health issues and not requesting a psychiatric evaluation. The appeal was denied, and his sentence remained unchanged. As time passed, the deepest tragedy remained for Madison, Shauna's daughter, who bore witness to the devastating impact of her mother's death. She moved away from the man who had tried to destroy their lives and now lives with Shauna's mother. Shauna's family channeled their grief into founding Justice for Shauna, an initiative aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence and manipulation. Her story now serves as a stark warning about how love can become lethal, how charm can be weaponized, and how the justice system, while imperfect, ultimately uncovered the truth. Beneath it all remains the memory of a woman who lived brightly, loved deeply, and deserved so much more. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.